Perfect. Can everyone hear me? Nice. Let me share my screen. I want to make sure everyone on the stream can see as well. Cool. Ignore that sneak peek. This is a presentation I'm going to copy a couple slides from our previous one, then we'll jump right in. So first off, my name is Zach. Been introduced. I'm one of the community organizers here with Reactadelphia. I'm also one of those people that got to fill in an earlier slot with my presentation because a couple people had to drop out. So definitely sign up. The more people we have in that backlog, the better we can make the content around our meetups. So a little bit about me. I'm a software developer. I work for a company called Pariveda Solutions. We're an IT consulting firm. We solve any number of problems as long as they're digital. We don't do a lot of hardware stuff, but if it's a web app, a mobile app, if it's a database, if it's a cloud service, we do it. I also like drones, the tiny little ones that if you crash into someone, you're probably gonna kill them. It's a little dangerous. Bouldering and Philly. So I'm kind of like the typical millennial. I write code, I'm a nerd, I don't know, I fly stuff. You can go to my website. I haven't updated it recently. My GitHub is Zach Butcher. My Twitter is Zach the Butcher. I'm trying to get a little more involved. So far, it's mostly just been meetup presentations. But that's it. If you have any questions about me or Pariveda, if you're looking for a job, you want to know what kind of consulting work we do, what types of projects we do, just come up to me after my talk, after the meetup. Just come find me. Reach out to me on one of the social channels. Cool. Enough of the sales pitch. So we're going to learn about design systems, and this is going to be an evolving series over the coming probably years. I'm not going to be able to present every month, so by the time we finally get to like forms, it's going to be a while. But first, we want to really start with foundational components or foundational pieces of a design system. So for those that are a little unfamiliar with what a design system is, it's this really big concept. It's got design rules, like what colors you use, what fonts and typography you use, the spacing around things, where you place stuff. Do you make it a big button, a small button? What color should that be? There's a lot of stuff that goes into a design system, but the gist is that it all boils down to, here's the rules that govern our brand. This is what makes us look like us. So if you look at like Walmart's website and you look at Kmart, they look distinctly different. They're both e-commerce platforms. You can go on and buy stuff, add products to a cart, but they look different. They've got different colors. One's blue, one's red. So design systems are what help developers and designers and just organizations in general maintain a consistent look and feel. It's really all you need to know about design systems, at least for this talk. So for starters, color is a foundational thing. Is anyone colorblind of any sort? Because it'll be interesting how this looks. All right, Paul, anyone else? Okay, so I'll just ask Paul how this looks as I'm presenting. Good. Which one? This top one? Yeah. All right, yeah, that's blue. Yeah, the bottom one's purple. Cool, yeah, so this will get really good when we start getting into spectrums. So you look at this bottom example. That's probably just one big smear for you, isn't it? Yeah. So I want to start with color. Color can evoke emotion. You know, reds are generally, or the warmer colors, reds, yellows, and oranges are generally associated with, on the negative end of the emotion spectrum, like rage and anger and frustration. But it could also just be exciting. And a lot of those warmer tones, the colors, they feed into the energy system of the user. You know, if a user's in a really hyped up mood, they're gonna get even more hyped. If they're really, really calm, they might actually get hyped up. Whereas the cooler colors, the blues, the purples, the greens, you end up kind of calming down. They're a little bit more soothing. It's more nature-esque. So there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of kind of science that goes into studying colors and how they affect us. We're not even going to talk about that. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. We want to keep this focused on just how can you as a developer, or you as maybe a stand-in designer, you as someone that has to make decisions around branding, around color, how can you make a slightly more informed decision? Or if is your best option, just go to a color generator online and use whatever they give you. So for starters, we really want to break out into two categories of color. There's your traditional physical world color that you learn in art class. It's your red, yellow, blue spectrum. So red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors. You mix them, so red plus yellow to get orange. That's a secondary color. Yellow and blue gives you green, red and blue gives you purple. Everyone with me? Nice. So from there, you can then take a primary color and a secondary color, mix them, and you'll get a blend. So you'll get a red-orange or a yellow-orange. Excuse me. And I gotta bring up my notes so I can make sure I give them the right names. They actually are really fun names. So red-orange is vermilion. Yellow-orange is amber. Yellow-green is chartreuse. So we get some really fun names in here too. I personally just prefer lime. It's shorter, easier. This is technically teal, but I don't know. Maybe I've got a different idea of what teal is. Maybe I'm kind of colorblind. But the idea is that you can take 3 colors and make 6, or make 3 more. Then you can mix those 6 colors in different ways to create another 6. So everything builds on itself until eventually you end up with the typical 12-color palette that most people are familiar with between those primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. All of that changes when you get to the digital world. So this covers everything from print, like it's still made by a digital device, a printer, to websites in general and just how TVs show light. They use an RGB spectrum. So they combine red light, green light, and blue light to give you everything else. So the primary colors still look familiar. Most of us, like red, green, blue, red, yellow, blue, doesn't feel like much of a difference, but it gets really weird once you start going into those secondary colors. You got cyan, which doesn't even exist on the red, yellow, blue color wheel, right? That's not a color that's on there. Nothing that bright exists in nature, at least not according to the way that physics and all the like paint and whatever else when you're combining it works. But the same principles apply. You mix red and green, you get your yellow. You mix red and blue, or red and green is yellow, green and blue is cyan over here. Sorry, the order got mixed up. And then red and blue gives you magenta instead of purple. And then down below, same thing applies. Take a primary, take a secondary, mix them together, you'll get your tertiary colors. And then you've got this rainbow at the bottom. Just so you can see them side by side. And let me use the hotkey. If I just blow this up. There we go. So we'll make it nice and real big. Both color wheels more or less look the same. The reds are the same, the blues are the same, the yellows are the same. Basically, all those primary and secondary colors are the same. They're just in a different position. The real differences come down to when you get those different blends in the tertiary color palette. So cyan replaces this teal color, and then you get azure in between. So you actually get a little bit more of a smooth transition from green to blue, but you lose that smooth transition from red to yellow. That's all you really need to know. 2 different systems, 2 different color kind of schemes that we have to deal with. For the rest of this talk, we're really going to be talking about RGB and hue, saturation, and lightness. So we're going to take it to the next step. Before we continue, we do need to get a little technical, and I promise this is about as technical as it gets. RGB, when you're dealing with color in web, it uses hexadecimal. So it uses 2 digits for the red channel, 2 for the green, and 2 for the blue. A hexadecimal value can have anything from 0 to 9 or A through F. So your possible values go from 00, which is 0 in the decimal system, all the way up to FF, which is 255 in the decimal system. So you've got 256 values for red, 256 values for green, 256 for blue. And with that, there are some important numbers just to have in your mind. 00, obviously, FF, those are your 2 extremes. That's your top and your bottom of your range. 80 or 7F, it kind of depends on how you want to count. 80 is 128, which is half of 256. If you want to round down because it's a 0 indexed number, or you can use 7F, which is 127. Doesn't really matter. We can't perceive that difference. At least most of us can't. And then finally, 1A is a 26 decimal value jump. So it's basically 10%. So 255, 26, it's about 10%. So what that looks like is for gray, where the red, green, and blue channels are all equal, a 10% change goes from FF. You remove 10% of the brightness, 10% of each value from each channel. You get E6, E6, E6. So we're just changing the amount of, or the volume, the level that each channel expresses itself. So when all the channels are turned off, you get a black screen. When you turn them all on, you get a white screen. If you want only one color, you just modulate the other 2. So if I keep the red channel maxed out at 255, and all I do is decrease the green and blue channels, I'll get those tints, and we'll go over the definition of this in a bit, the tints of red. If I go to my 50%, you can see that the green and blue channels aren't even turned on. This is the most pure red, the brightest red I can possibly get. And then from there, I actually have to reduce the red to get the darker tones, or sorry, the darker shades. Same thing applies for green. You'll see that the red and blue channels change. For blue, you see that the red and green channels change. So those are your primary colors. That's how you work in RGB space. Any questions so far? Not too much math? Nice. So one last thing, I mentioned shades, tones, hues. Just to get terminology straight, hue is what most people think about when they think about color. So red, green, blue, that's your hue. It really just refers to what chroma, what color you're looking at. If you want to add black, you want to make something darker, you call that a shade. And in Hex, what you're actually doing is you're just removing white, or you're removing the values or reducing the intensity of those color channels. So you can't actually add black. That's not a thing you do with light, but you can remove white, and that will lower the shade of your color. Conversely, you can add white, which instead of removing white, you just add it, and you'll get those tints. So that's how you increase the lightness of a color. And then finally, we have tones. You can't do this with RGB. If we're looking at this, you see that everything has the same hex code. It's all FF0000. But what you can do is modulate a CSS property using the filter style or the filter CSS property and change the saturation value. So there's a function that you can use called saturate. And if you do it at 0.5, you'll get this color red. So it's adding a gray by reducing the amount of saturation a color has. It's hacky. You have to rely on a style. There's actually better ways to do this just using other tools where you can create a hex code that looks like that shade without having to worry about additional CSS support. And then that way, hex codes are universally, or work universally across every browser. Filter and CSS classes and properties. If you got to support IE8, good luck. So there's ways around this. Cool. So the next thing is just seeing how these colors play together. So this demo, I just have the red channel turned all the way up, so we've got a base color, but I can change what my base color is by increasing or decreasing, excuse me, the individual channels. So I've got this nice like salmon pink color that I get by combining these three values for each channel. So red's FF, you can see the FF down here. You've got 3B for the green and 57 for the blue. And what we can do is by simply shifting which channel shows up in which slot, we can change which colors we're working with. So our primary color is this salmon-y pinky color. And then all I did was I took RGB and I shifted it 1. So now I start with blue. My blue channel feeds into the red. My red feeds into the green, and my green feeds into the blue. All I did was rotate. Does everyone see that? Because if I need to just show the demo, okay, yeah, this will be good. So let me just move this over here. Let's please get rid of my sidebar. Okay, maybe if I refresh. Well, yeah, so if I zoom out, then it's like super small. There we go. Cool. Okay, so we're back. So, and this method actually doesn't work if you pick a primary or a secondary color. So if you feed in yellow, you're only going to get the 3 colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. If you feed in red, you're only going to get red, green, and blue. So this method only works if you have a tertiary color that you're using as your base color. So let's go back to that orange-ish color. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So in order for me to get that green-ish color from this orange, I'll just make this a little bit bigger. I can find my hex codes. Actually, let me make sure I remember how I'm doing this. Okay, cool. So I can take these hex codes. I can take the DE, or sorry, we'll do the 14. So I'm taking my blue channel, and instead of it being blue, I'm just gonna put it in the red channel. Actually, I want this one. I want the RGB. So we want 20 to be on the far left side. And when I do that, you'll see that the same green was there. So it's really all we're doing is we're taking it and we're translating it. We're shifting everything by 1. So if it was on the end, it goes to the beginning, and then you just do that twice. And that gives you the 3 colors that we're looking at first. Again, we'll just generate that. So basically just shift your hex codes, your channels, one at a time, and you'll get 3 kind of starting primary colors. The next thing you do, and we'll have to do this a little bit more extreme, there we go. The next thing you do is you actually just resequence them. So instead of red, green, blue, you do red, blue, green. And then you shift those one at a time. So if you look at this one, D36 or D3, 6B, 3E, that's your RGB. If you look at this color, the only thing I did, I still have the D3 there, but the 3E, the blue channel, is now in the green position. So it's really cool. It's really magical. It just does this automatically for us. You just shift some colors around, don't really change any of the hex values, and all of these colors work together in a complementary way. You can put all of these colors in a web app and it's not going to look bad. The web app may look bad, but at least the colors will look okay. I probably should have prefaced this by saying I'm not a designer. So that's cool and all, but that's dealing with hex. That's dealing with like some really complicated math. Programming this is a nightmare. You can look at the source code. The biggest file is this hex magic one. It's disgusting. SAS though, let me tell you about our Lord and Savior. This is so much better. Again, I'm not going to go too far into the code. I'm just going to talk about high-level procedure and what we do to achieve this color palette. SAS has the ability to work with hue, saturation, and lightness. So it's a different color space. It's similar to RGB, but because you have that lightness modifier and the saturation modifier, you have the ability to generate hex values that appear like they have saturation that's been decreased. Or you can make colors that fill out a color wheel more programmatically. So instead of iterating between 0 and 255, it's just degrees on a circle. So you've got 0 through 360. And then the math on that gets really easy. You want a 12 color palette, split that pie slice or split that color wheel into 60-degree increments. 30-degree increments. Do it into 60, you've got a 6 color palette. You only want 3 colors, break it up into, what is it? Got to do math, 120? Yeah. So you got to do 120 degrees in between each color. But it's very easy to just programmatically iterate over a given interval just to generate one color from another. The other thing you can do is you can take those saturation values and it'll modify the hex value to appear as if you added gray or you took gray away. And then finally with the lightness, you get a really smooth transition from your lightest to your darkest. So if we did take a look at the mix-ins, we can see, let's make this bigger. When we do this, I just start with a base configuration. I've got a base gray, which I think I defined as 80, 80, 80, which is, if you look at the browser gray, that's it. So it's baseline 50% gray. And then all I did was I used some color scale functions from SAS to decrease the lightness by 75%, 50%, and 25. And then I did it on the flip side of adding lightness in 25, 50, and 75% increments. And that just gives me this nice linear look. So this isn't addressing accessibility. It's not addressing color contrast. It's just making sure that I've got shades to work with. So I can put this really, really light shade on top of this really, really dark shade, and it'll look okay. I'm not really, again, designer. There's better ways of doing this. This is really just so that a developer can get up and running. So we start with that base color palette, defining all of our grays, and then we start with a seed color. We're just calling it primary in this case. My specific one is defined as F00. So another thing with hex, if you only specify 3 values, it duplicates each channel. So this is FF0000. So it's 2 Fs for the red channel, 2 zeros for the green, 2 zeros for the blue. It's just gonna extrapolate it out. That's just like shortcut CSS properties. So when I do that, I get this color palette. So the lightness between this red and this red is the same as the lightness difference between this gray and this gray, because it was a 25% decrease. Where the cool stuff comes in, C39. This was the last one I tried that it worked. So I just changed my primary color to this purple-esque color. And now if I go and I generate my styles, I can't see because Zoom's in the way. So yarn build styles. And I'm actually gonna bring the color palette up in the background so we can watch it happen. So when I run my build styles, all we're doing is updating that base color. I haven't changed my grays. I haven't changed anything else. I've only changed the base primary color that I want to generate a palette off of. Once it's done, you'll see that everything shifted. Everything still looks good. Everything still kind of flows together. They've all got a similar look and feel. Obviously, the contrast is different. The specific shade of purple that I use to generate my color palette has a little bit more gray in it. So you're going to see a little bit more of a muted tone when you're looking at this color palette versus the previous one. Because the previous one was like pure red. Just give me the most pure colors you can, and that's what we got. Here, we're getting something that's a little more muted to generate that entire color palette from. Again, it's really best if you look at the source code or ask questions specifically about it. But it's really cool. Most of it exists within this mixins file, and then this functions where it's actually doing some of the computational stuff, the heavy lifting. But it's just a really cool, quick and easy way to get up with 6, 12, literally anything that's that can divide 360. You can create a color palette that just works. And just to show that in effect, if I change this from 12 to 6, build the styles, come back here. I don't even have to refresh the page, but I've got a 6 color palette. And I just changed one value. And as developers, this is the type of stuff that we just love. Anyways, without getting too far into the sentimental, the next step is really figuring out how you mix and match colors. And I need to go back to that 12 color palette though, because my entire demo is based on it. So when you're talking about colors and how you mix and match them, it's really important to just understand a color wheel in general. So I've got this lovely website that I deleted most of the ads for. And we're really just going to talk about most of these. And this is the red, yellow, blue color scheme or color space. But the same rules apply to RGB. Complementary colors are just on the opposite side. So red is opposite cyan. Your primary is always opposite a secondary. If you look at triadic color schemes, you're looking at an equally spaced triangle. So red, green, blue is triadic. It doesn't always look good, but at least those colors work together. Tetradic is another fun one. It's if you need 4 colors. Let's say you've got a primary and 3 accent colors for warning, error, and success. That could be a tetradic color scheme. And the way you get that is by setting 2 sets of complementary colors together. So red and cyan plus, I think it's yellow and magenta, or no, yellow and violet are across from each other. But these are the basic color schemes that allow you to put a bunch of colors from a palette that is cohesive into an application and build with it. So getting back to here, if we have a base color of this purple that we've chosen, its complementary color on the exact opposite side is this like spring green, minty kind of color. And if we look at analogous, it's really just that color plus its neighbors. So we get our purple in the middle and we get a violet or this pinkish color in the middle, red on the right and purple on the other side. So analogous is just 3 colors in a row. Triadic is that equally spaced, split complementary, and then you take the complementary colors neighbors. So instead of cyan, you use the green, blue, and you use the azure colors. And then for tetradic, like I said before, it's just 2 sets of complementary. So you already saw this complementary set above. This is just a different complementary set that's been offset from that original color. And the cool part is this is all dynamic. So I can just pick a new primary color and I get to see completely different color schemes that all work within the same system. And I can even make them lighter or darker to give them different appearances. So if you notice here, it's really difficult to tell, but this green or these greens down here look more like winter or evergreen or something like hunter green. And you can build those really dark, rich, earthy colors out of it. Or you can go into light pastels over on this side and build 2 completely different looking websites. And actually, here's a live demo that shows that kind of in action. So let's pick one that doesn't look terrible. And these are all split complementary, but you can actually, or these might be analogous. Yeah, these, last time I saved these were analogous colors. So you can see how, even though we're just using shades of green, we can build a cohesive design that, you know, the header is your primary color. You want that to be the most visible color on your website. Your secondary color that we're using here for the buttons, you just want that to be the second most populated color on the website. And then finally, we've got this tertiary one that's around the secondary button, just to throw in a little extra accent. But very quickly, just in the way that we've set this up, we could then go in to the components. not config, foundations, colors, brand, oops, not the markdown. But we can go in and instead of them being live code, okay. Instead of them being analogous, we can actually set it to like 6 plus, let's see, what is it? 7 and 9. And this will give us that split complementary color scheme. So we're going complementary, opposite sides of the color wheel, and then either side of that complementary color. So we've got the purple. The complementary color is azure, sitting right between this greenish blue, this seafoam color, and then this blue. So there's a middle one in between that is that azure-ish kind of color that sits in the middle. But we get a completely different look and feel just by picking different colors in that color palette. And you really just, you pick the one that jives. If you like this, see, that's not the worst watermelon. There was another watermelon in here somewhere that got pretty bad. But you can do that. And then you can even, let's say we wanted like a real plummy color. All I did was change which shade from that big color palette is on here. And I've got a different look and feel. And maybe when we do this, we recognize that this blue feels really dark compared to the secondary seafoam color. So we're just gonna lighten it up a bit. Like, it was that easy. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You just build a palette that builds itself, and then you just pick a bunch of shades from it, and 9 times out of 10, it's gonna look okay. So that's most of it. I do apologize, I made this in about a week. So there's plenty more to cover with color. There's a lot of in-depth studies. There's a lot of theory, a lot of philosophy. I think the most important part to take out of this is that there's color generators, there's tried and true color rules, like pick complementary colors if you want high contrast, pick analogous colors if you're trying to fit a more monochromatic theme. You know, maybe your brand color is shades of gray. That's a bad color. Shades of green. And you want it to have that cohesive thing where you've got some dark greens that really like lure the user in as we're earthy, we're down to, or like we care about our people and we care about the environment. And then it's got the light greens to help brighten the design up. Because if you just cover a website in hunter green, it's gonna be really hard to look at. But if you pop in some extra little brightness here and there, you can build a more cohesive look without trying too hard. So I'll stop now for questions. Again, with the caveat, I built this in a week. Nice. I am. The Hex code. Yeah.
Hold on
yeah,
a
one
second.
We got microphones.
Don't break the rules here.
Hello. So hex codes have 6 digits, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you omit any of them? Like RGB, what happens?
Yeah, so if you omit any of them, it just turns into, I believe, nothing. I think it renders straight to white. So we can take, let's take this, I think yeah. So that just removes it. Like the render won't do anything. If you did go the next step, so we've deleted, oh, it actually removed it from the properties. Whoops. So yeah, let's find that color again. So it's this one. So if you went too far, let's say you went all the way to this, it tries to imagine what color you meant, but 4 digits isn't real or it's not valid. So it just goofs off and you can't trust what color it does come up with. But then if you go one step further, then it treats it like a 3-digit hex and then it'll just double every value. So CC 33 in this case.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you better. You know what's going to happen if you don't. We're getting strict around here.
Hey, first of all, this is awesome. Thank you. Secondly, I noticed you were tinkering with the split complementary colors that came up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just like shooting from the hip or just, you know, milling it to like look polished? So those rules of color theory, they're not fixed, basically. Like we can make variations on the theme just to make it look better to us.
Oh yeah, so if you go to there's some tools. Adobe has a really good Adobe color picker. Color.adobe. Should have this memorized. Adobe has made they've got really good articles about redoing color palettes for an enterprise level system because they rebuilt all of their Creative Suite And when they like upgraded everything, like unified the systems. When they started doing the subscription model, rebuilt everything so they had a consistent look and feel across every platform. So if you ever want to learn more, like definitely go into here. But to that point of designers are much better at this than we are. We just need something to like get us started so that our own personal website looks okay. So if we did want to pick like this triad, you can see that Adobe actually gives us 5 colors, not 3. And what they do is they tell you that some of these are going to be accent colors. And in this case, they do enforce that the accent colors have to be darker or lighter versions of 2 of them. But then you can get into things like, they actually don't have, maybe it's compound. Well, I can show you in my demo. When you go to things like the tetradic colors, the important piece is just that they're complementary. So red and cyan have to go together, but you can pick a completely different complementary set from that. So there's a traditional one that's a square tetrad, where it's basically 90 degrees between each color, if you're thinking in the hue space. So it's 90 degrees between each color. But you could pick red and orange as your 2 base colors, and then you get cyan and azure as your others. And then in code, I would just go into color and brand. I can find the tetrad shift that I put. And so if I just did it by 1, I'm gonna get that red, orange, cyan, and azure. Oh, well, I gotta make red the primary color. So again, I didn't have FF like red, but this is our red, our cyan, our orange, and our azure. So the rules are general. You know, complementary colors have to be opposite, but the specific degree at which they're separated, when you get into triads or you get into these tetrads, you can work with offsets to try to like merge it. Really, this is just about finding a baseline of, hey, except for that color. Hey, all these colors just look good together. But if I notice that maybe these darks are too dark, I could go in individually. And if I remember those rules about hex, I think these were, yeah, so these use the CSS variables. So if I find this one, color 1-1, and I go, oh, this is a little too dark, but I know how to add 1A to every value. I'm just gonna spitball here. This is definitely not how you do it. But if I just like made this 1A and then.
That'd be 1E.
Oh, 1E?
Yeah.
Oops, hey.
Oh, shit.
So like if I increased that one, and then I don't even remember what that value was before. We'll just jump all the way up to like 3D now. Oh. So I keep deleting the color, which is useless. But if you were good at like hex math, you could just, like better than me, you could just go in and modify those values individually and say, yeah, I really need this dark purple to be a little bit lighter. But yeah, there's general rules. There's nothing super strict other than complementary has to be dead opposite.
Zach, we got a question from Twitch.
Nice.
So I think this is sort of a follow-up to what you were talking about earlier when you just have like 3 hex values.
Okay.
The question was, no, where'd it go? Oh, I was so prepared and then it scrolled away. I think the question was, does it add like preceding zeros or following zeros? Can you like elaborate a little bit more on just using the 3, like what kind of happens when you use 3 hex colors, 3 digits in a hex?
Yeah,
value?
so I'll look at these 2. So I'm gonna keep the red one is the one that we're gonna use as our constant. But if I change this yellow one to background color FF or F00, disable that one. So if I do it as F00, that gives me the color I want. If I do it as background color FF0000, I get that same color. The browser doesn't care and it doesn't reformat. It just treats them the same. It assumes that when you give it 3 values for its hex, it assumes that each value is doubled. So FF0000. Alternatively, if I did, which is really good if you want to do like really fast shade changes, just because things are duplicated. So if you had FF00, if I just increase this by 1, I'm increasing it very quickly by changing that blue channel. And then obviously because of the way that the browser counts, it's gonna start incrementing that green channel because I'm using the arrow keys. But this is a really fast way to just like quick and dirty make shades. Because I could just go like F11, and then I can go F22, and I can go F33. It's really small increment, but but each one I'm increasing the brightness by 1 value each time, or it's a bigger jump than that because it's doubled, but it at least keeps it constant.
Cool.
I think we got time for one more question if anybody has one before we let this Zach go and continue our Zach attack with another Zach. So